The rope coiled in her trembling hands felt heavier than iron chains as Catherine Everett stood outside the territorial courthouse in Fairplay, Colorado, knowing that by sundown she would be sold into servitude to pay her father's debts. The autumn wind of 1878 whipped through the mountain town, carrying with it the scent of pine and the distant promise of early snow. Catherine pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of the general store, watching miners and ranchers file into the courthouse across the dusty street. Her father had been dead 3 months, crushed in a cave-in at the Lucky Strike mine, and the debts he had accumulated in his final desperate year of gambling and drinking now fell squarely on her shoulders. $1,700. An impossible sum for a 22-year-old woman with no family and no prospects. The territorial judge had been clear. Either she paid the debt in full by 4 o'clock today, or she would be bound by contract to work for Silas Crane, the saloon owner who held most of her father's markers. Everyone in Fairplay knew what happened to women who worked off debts at Crane's Golden Lady Saloon. They served drinks until Crane decided they should serve something else entirely, and by then, their contracts had mysteriously extended. The terms changed. The debts somehow growing rather than shrinking. Catherine had tried everything. She had sold every possession her father owned, worked double shifts at the boarding house for 3 months, even pawned her mother's wedding ring. She had raised $430. It might as well have been $4 for all the difference it made. Miss Everett. A voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She turned to find a tall man standing a respectful distance away, hat in his hands. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and despite the trail dust on his clothes, there was something inherently decent in his bearing. Yes, Catherine straightened, trying to maintain some dignity even though she knew she looked as desperate as she felt. Her dress was clean but threadbare, mended so many times the original fabric was hard to determine. "My name is Tobias Morgan. I wonder if I might have a word with you before the hearing." Catherine studied him warily. She had never seen him before, which meant little in a town that swelled and shrank with the mining seasons. "I do not have time for words, Mr. Morgan. I have a debt to settle and no means to settle it. That is precisely what I wish to discuss." He gestured toward the small restaurant beside the general store. 5 minutes, please." Something in his voice made her pause. Not pity, which she had endured plenty of in recent weeks, not the calculating interest she had seen in Silas Crane's eyes, just simple earnestness. Against her better judgment, Catherine nodded. The restaurant was nearly empty at this hour, the lunch crowd long dispersed. Tobias Morgan held out a chair for her before taking his own seat. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "I understand you owe Silas Crane $1,700, and that if you cannot pay by 4 o'clock today, you will be contractually bound to work at his establishment until the debt is satisfied." Catherine felt her cheeks burn, but she lifted her chin. "My circumstances are hardly secret, Mr. Morgan. Half the territory seems to know my business. Are you here to gawk, or did you have a point?" "I am here to pay your debt." The words hung in the air between them like something physical. Catherine stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon. I want to pay your debt, all of it, $1,700. He said it as calmly as if he were offering to buy her coffee. "That is insane." Catherine pushed back from the table. "I do not know you, you do not know me. People do not simply hand over that kind of money to strangers. I am not handing it over." Tobias leaned forward, his gray eyes intent. "I am paying a debt that should never have fallen on your shoulders. Your father made his choices, and he paid for them with his life. You should not have to pay further. Why? The question came out harsh, suspicious. What do you want from me? Nothing. Catherine laughed bitterly. Everyone wants something, Mr. Morgan, especially men offering money to women in difficult circumstances. So why do not you tell me plainly what you expect in return? To her surprise, he did not look offended. Instead, a flicker of something sad crossed his face. Because 6 years ago, my sister found herself in similar circumstances in a town in Texas. A man paid her debts and asked for nothing. He saved her life, Miss Everett. Literally saved it. I swore then that if I ever had the means and the opportunity, I would do the same for someone else. Not to be thanked, not to be repaid, just to balance the scales a little. Where is your sister now? Catherine asked quietly. Married with 3 children, living in San Antonio. Happy. The warmth in his voice when he spoke of her was genuine. She and her husband run a freight business. They are doing well. Catherine wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But life had taught her hard lessons about trusting in unexpected salvation. And what do you do, Mr. Morgan? How does a man come to have $1,700 he can simply give away? I have a ranch about 15 miles north of here. Cattle mostly, some horses. I have done well the past few years, and I live simply. The money is mine to spend as I choose, and I choose to spend it keeping you out of Silas Crane's clutches. I cannot accept this. But even as she said it, Catherine felt the words ring hollow. She could accept it. She would accept it. Because the alternative was unthinkable. You can and you will. Tobias stood, settling his hat back on his head. The hearing is in an hour. I will be there with the money. You do not owe me anything, Miss Everett. Not gratitude, not repayment, not even a kind word. Once this is done, you will never have to see me again if you do not wish to. He walked toward the door, and Catherine found herself calling after him. Mr. Morgan. He turned, and she continued, her voice unsteady. Why did you not just pay the debt without telling me? You could have settled with Crane privately. Because you deserve to know, deserve to have a choice, even if it is just the choice of whether to speak to me afterward. He tipped his hat. I will see you at the courthouse, Miss Everett. Catherine sat alone in the restaurant for a long time after he left, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she did not remember ordering. The whole encounter felt dreamlike, impossible. Yet when she entered the courthouse an hour later, there was Tobias Morgan, standing quietly at the back of the room with a leather satchel in his hands. Judge Hamilton called the proceedings to order with little ceremony. Silas Crane sat at the plaintiff's table, his expensive suit at odds with his predatory smile. He looked at Catherine like a man inspecting a horse he planned to purchase. Miss Everett, Judge Hamilton said, his voice not unkind, you stand before this court owing the sum of $1,700 to Mr. Silas Crane. Do you have the means to settle this debt? Before Catherine could answer, Tobias Morgan stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may. Crane turned in his seat, his eyes narrowing. Judge Hamilton looked surprised. Mr. Morgan, I did not realize you had an interest in these proceedings. I am here to settle Miss Everett's debt in full. Tobias placed the satchel on the table before the judge. $1,700, counted and ready. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Crane shot to his feet. Now wait just a minute. What is your relationship to Miss Everett? Are you acting as some kind of intermediary for a loan? No loan, Tobias said calmly. I am paying the debt as a gift. Miss Everett owes me nothing. Crane's face darkened. That is highly irregular. Your Honor, I must protest. This seems like a scheme to defraud me of what is rightfully owed. You are being paid in full, Crane, Judge Hamilton said, already counting the money Tobias had produced. I fail to see how that constitutes fraud. The girl's father owed me that money. I have a right to see the debt settled in the manner prescribed by law." "The manner prescribed by law is payment of the debt," the judge said dryly, "which is precisely what is happening. Unless you would prefer to contest that the money is counterfeit." He held up several bills. "All legitimate as far as I can tell." Crane looked like he wanted to argue further, but even he could see he had no legal ground to stand on. He snatched the money from the judge's hands, counting it twice with swift, angry movements. Finally, he nodded curtly. "The debt is settled." Judge Hamilton banged his gavel. "The matter is resolved. Miss Everett, you are free of all obligations to Mr. Crane. This court is adjourned." Catherine stood frozen as people filed out around her. It had taken less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to undo months of terror and desperation. Silas Crane shoved past her without a word, though the look he gave her promised that he would not forget this. She did not care. She was free. Tobias Morgan was waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post. Catherine walked over to him slowly, unsure of what to say. "How did you thank someone for giving you back your life?" "It is done," he said simply. "You are free to go wherever you wish, Miss Everett." "I do not have anywhere to go." The admission came out before she could stop it. "The boarding house where I worked let me go last week. Said they could not keep me on knowing I would be working for Crane soon. I have been sleeping in the hayloft at the livery." Something shifted in Tobias's expression. "I have a housekeeper position available at my ranch if you are interested. The pay is fair and it comes with room and board. But I want to be clear, this is not part of the debt. You are free to refuse without any obligation." "You do not even know if I can cook or clean." "Can you?" Catherine thought of the years she had kept house for her father, the endless meals cooked and clothes mended while he drank away his wages. "Yes, I can." "Then the job is yours if you want it, but think on it, Miss Everett." "You do not have to decide right now." "I want it." The words came out firm, certain. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning. I have supplies to pick up in town, so I will be staying at the hotel tonight. Meet me at the livery at dawn and we will ride out together." He touched his hat. "Until tomorrow, then." Catherine watched him walk away, feeling as though the entire world had tilted on its axis. This morning she had been facing a future worse than death. Now she had a job, a place to live, and something she had not felt in months: hope. She spent her last night in Fairplay's livery loft, but this time she slept peacefully, her small bundle of possessions clutched to her chest. When dawn broke cold and clear over the mountains, she was waiting at the livery when Tobias arrived with 2 horses, one of them saddled with a gentler seat. "This is Rosie," he said, introducing her to a calm bay mare. "She has an easy gait, good for long rides." "I have not ridden much," Catherine admitted. "My father could not afford to keep horses. Rosie will take care of you." Tobias helped her mount, his hands respectful and brief. Then he swung up onto his own horse, a rangy buckskin gelding. "The ranch is about 3 hours north. We will take it slow." They rode out of Fairplay as the town was waking up, past the miners heading to their claims and the merchants opening their shops. Catherine did not look back. There was nothing in that town she wanted to remember. The trail climbed steadily into the mountains, following a creek that rushed and tumbled over rocks. Aspens blazed gold against the evergreen forest, and the air smelled clean and sharp. Tobias rode slightly ahead, but he checked back frequently to make sure she was managing. They did not talk much, but the silence was companionable rather than awkward. Around mid-morning, they stopped to rest the horses beside the creek. Tobias produced bread and cheese from his saddlebags and shared it without fanfare. Catherine ate slowly, savoring food she had not had to beg or borrow. "Tell me about the ranch," she said finally. "What will my duties be?" "Cooking, mostly. Cleaning the main house, some mending. I have 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. They handle their own quarters, but they take meals at the main house. Breakfast before dawn, dinner at midday, supper after the work is done. He paused. It is a lot of work, I will not lie, but you will have Sundays off and the hands are good men. They will treat you with respect or answer to me. 3 hands and yourself. That is not a large operation. No, but it is growing. I started with nothing 6 years ago. Now I have 200 head of cattle and about 30 horses. In another few years I hope to double that. There was quiet pride in his voice, the kind that came from hard-earned success. "Where are you from originally?" Catherine asked. "You do not sound like Colorado-born." "Texas. Grew up outside Fort Worth. Came north after I made my promise to help someone the way my sister was helped. Figured Colorado needed cowboys as much as anywhere." "Do you miss it?" "Texas?" Tobias considered this. "Sometimes. But I have built something here. This is home now." They rode on, and as the sun climbed higher, the landscape opened up into high meadows framed by snow-capped peaks. Catherine had lived in Fairplay for 2 years, but she had never ventured this far into the backcountry. The beauty of it caught at something in her chest. Finally, they crested a rise and Tobias pointed ahead. "There. That is Morgan Ranch." The house sat in a broad valley with the creek running through it. It was not large, but it was well built, a sturdy log structure with a covered porch and stone chimney. Nearby stood a barn, a bunkhouse, and several corrals. Cattle grazed across the meadow, and horses dotted the hillside beyond. "It is beautiful," Catherine said softly. "It is home." Tobias guided his horse down the slope. "Come on, I will show you around." The inside of the house was clean but clearly lacking a woman's touch. The furniture was functional, the rooms unadorned. Tobias showed her to a small bedroom off the kitchen, simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. "This will be yours," he said. "The hands know you are coming, but I will introduce you properly at supper. Give yourself time to settle in first." Catherine set down her bundle, looking around the little room. It was plain, but it was hers. A door that closed, a window that looked out on the mountains, a bed she did not have to share or earn. "Thank you," she whispered. Tobias lingered in the doorway. "Miss Everett, I want to be clear about something. You work for me and I am your employer. That means you have rights and protections. If anyone, and I mean anyone, makes you uncomfortable or treats you poorly, you come to me. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." He nodded toward the kitchen. "I will leave you to get settled. Come out when you are ready, and I will show you where everything is." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Catherine sat on the bed, testing the mattress. It was firm, filled with fresh straw and topped with quilts that smelled of cedar. She lay back, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling beams, and felt tears slip down her temples. She was safe. She was free. And she owed it all to a stranger who asked for nothing in return. Over the following days, Catherine settled into the rhythms of ranch life. She rose before dawn to start breakfast for the men, feeding them hearty meals of bacon, eggs, biscuits, and coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. The ranch hands, Buck, Sam, and young Willie, treated her with cautious respect, clearly having been warned by Tobias to mind their manners. Tobias himself was polite but distant, always respectful of her space and privacy. He worked alongside his men from sunup to sundown, breaking horses, mending fences, moving cattle to better grazing. Catherine watched him sometimes from the kitchen window, noting the easy way he sat a horse, the quiet authority he commanded. He was fair with the men, quick to praise good work and patient with mistakes. She learned his habits quickly. He liked his coffee black, his eggs scrambled, his bread toasted if there was time. He always thanked her for meals, always wiped his boots before entering the house. In the evenings, he would sometimes sit on the porch, reading by lamplight or just watching the sun set over the mountains. Catherine found herself wanting to know more about him. What had brought him north beyond his promise to help someone in need? What did he think about during those long silences? Did he ever get lonely out here with just his ranch and his handful of men? But she kept her questions to herself. He had given her a job and asked for nothing. She would not presume to intrude on his privacy. 3 weeks after her arrival, an early snowstorm rolled through the valley. Catherine woke to find the world transformed, blanketed in white. She dressed quickly and hurried to the kitchen, knowing the men would need hot food and plenty of it. She was pulling biscuits from the oven when Tobias came in, stamping snow from his boots. His face was drawn with concern. "We have got cattle scattered all over the high pastures," he said without preamble. "This storm came on faster than expected. We are going to be out there most of the day rounding them up. Can you keep food warm for whenever we get back? Of course. Be careful." He paused, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "We will." Then he was gone, calling for the hands to saddle up. Catherine spent the day keeping the stove hot, preparing batches of stew and coffee, watching anxiously as the snow continued to fall. It was late afternoon when she heard horses outside. She rushed to the door and found Tobias and Sam supporting Buck between them. Buck's face was gray with pain, his leg bent at a wrong angle. "He fell in a ravine," Sam explained as they helped Buck inside. "Horse spooked and he went down hard." "Get him on the table," Catherine ordered, her mind racing. She had tended her father through enough mining accidents to know basic field medicine. "Tobias, I need clean cloth, whiskey, and something straight and sturdy for a splint." They worked together in silent coordination. Catherine examined Buck's leg while Tobias held him still. The break was clean, thank God, the bone not protruding. She set it as gently as she could while Buck bit down on a leather strap and groaned through clenched teeth. Tobias handed her supplies without being asked, seeming to anticipate her needs. "He needs a doctor," Catherine said when the leg was splinted and wrapped. "This is the best I can do, but it should be properly set. The doctor in Fairplay will not come out here in this weather." Tobias wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cold. "We will have to take Buck to him tomorrow if the snow lets up." They moved Buck to the bunkhouse, making him as comfortable as possible. Catherine brought him hot soup and willow bark tea for the pain. When she returned to the house, she found Tobias still in the kitchen, staring at his hands. "You did good," he said quietly. "Real good. That could have been a lot worse." "I just did what needed doing." "No," he looked up at her. "You knew what you were doing. You stayed calm." "Buck is lucky you were here." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I am glad I could help." Their eyes met and held for a long moment. Catherine felt something shift between them, some invisible line being crossed. Tobias seemed to feel it too because he stood abruptly, breaking the contact. "I should check on the other cattle. Get some rest, Miss Everett. It has been a long day." After he left, Catherine cleaned up the kitchen slowly, thinking about the way he had looked at her. Like she was someone worth seeing. Like she mattered. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. Falling for her employer would be foolish beyond measure. He had saved her from servitude, given her a job and a home. She would not repay that kindness by developing feelings he did not return. But as the weeks turned into months and winter settled over the valley in earnest, Catherine found it increasingly difficult to guard her heart. Tobias was everything her father had not been. Steady, responsible, kind. He worked hard but treated his animals and his men with care. He read books in the evenings and could discuss everything from cattle breeding to philosophy. When the creek froze solid, he skated on it like a boy, laughing at his own clumsiness. Catherine watched him teach young Willie to rope, patient through countless failed attempts. She saw him give Sam an advance on his wages when Sam's mother took sick back in Kansas. She noticed the way he always made sure she had enough firewood, how he insisted she take Sundays off even when she protested there was work to be done. And sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Christmas came, and Catherine prepared a feast for the men. She had been saving her wages, and she used some of them to buy fabric in town, sewing simple but warm shirts for each of the ranch hands. For Tobias, she made a new vest, carefully embroidering his initials on the inside pocket. When she gave it to him on Christmas morning, he stared at it for a long moment before looking up at her with something raw and unguarded in his eyes. "You did not have to do this. I wanted to. You have all been kind to me, Catherine." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his rough voice sent shivers down her spine. "I did not do what I did expecting anything back. I know, this is not repayment, it is a gift freely given." He held her gaze, and she saw him struggle with something internal. Finally, he said, "I have something for you too. Wait here." He returned a few minutes later with a small wooden box. Inside was a pair of silver hair combs, simple but beautifully crafted. "They were my mother's," Tobias said quietly. "She died when I was 15. I have been carrying them around for years, not knowing what to do with them, but I think she would have wanted you to have them." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Tobias, I cannot accept these. They are too precious." "Please." He took one of the combs from the box and with infinite gentleness slid it into her hair. His fingers brushed her temple, and Catherine felt the touch all the way to her toes. "They should be worn by someone who appreciates them, someone who deserves beautiful things." "I do not deserve them," she whispered. "I do not deserve any of this. You deserve everything." The words came out fierce, passionate. "You deserve a life free from fear and want. You deserve to be cherished, Catherine. You deserve so much more than what you have been given. You gave me my life back. No, I just gave you the chance to live it." His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. "What you have done with that chance, that is all you." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the winter sun streaming through the window, and Catherine knew she was lost. She loved this man, loved him with a depth and certainty that terrified her. "Tobias," she breathed, and she saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect. Catherine's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally parted, Tobias rested his forehead against hers. "I tried not to feel this way," he admitted. "Tried to keep my distance. But Catherine, you have become everything to me. I wake up thinking about you. I go to sleep with your face in my mind. I love you. I am in love with you." "I love you too." The confession came out on a sob. "I have for months. I tried to stop myself, tried to remember that you are my employer and I owe you so much, but I cannot help it." "You owe me nothing," he said fiercely. "How many times do I have to say it? You owe me nothing. But if you could give me your heart freely, Catherine Everett, I would treasure it for the rest of my life. It is already yours." She kissed him again, deeper this time, pouring months of longing into it. "It has been yours since the day you walked into that courthouse and saved me." They spent Christmas Day together, just the two of them, while the ranch hands went to town for celebrations. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their hopes and dreams. Tobias told her about growing up in Texas, about watching his sister nearly destroyed by debt and despair, about the man who had saved her and sparked in Tobias a determination to do the same for someone else. "I came to Colorado specifically looking for someone to help," he admitted. I made good money on a cattle drive north, and I used it to buy this ranch. But I always kept that $1,700 separate, waiting for the right moment. Then I heard about you, about what Silas Crane was planning, and I knew. This was what I had been waiting for. You could have helped anyone, Catherine said. Why me? Because when I saw you standing outside that courthouse, you were not defeated. You were terrified, yes, but you were not broken. You still had fight in you. I saw someone worth saving. Someone who would make something of the second chance. He traced her jawline with his finger. I was right. You have made this house a home, Catherine. You have made this ranch something worth coming back to at the end of the day. This is the first place I have felt safe since my mother died, Catherine confessed. She passed when I was 16, and after that, my father just fell apart. He could not handle his grief, so he drowned it in whiskey and cards. I spent years trying to hold things together, but he kept gambling, kept losing. By the time we came to fair play, he was desperate. I think part of him wanted to die in that mine. I think he was tired of fighting. I am sorry you went through that. I am not anymore. She laced her fingers through his, because it led me here, to you. As winter deepened, Catherine and Tobias grew closer. They were careful around the ranch hands, maintaining professional boundaries during the day. But in the evenings, after the men had retired to the bunkhouse, they would sit together by the fire, talking and kissing and dreaming about the future. In early February, Tobias took her aside after breakfast. I have to go to Denver for a week. There is a cattle auction and I want to see about buying some breeding stock. Will you be all right here with the hands, of course? But will you be all right without me? Catherine smiled teasingly. Absolutely not. He pulled her close. I will miss you every second, then come back quickly. I will bring you something from the city. What would you like? Just come back safe. That is all I want. He left the next morning, and the ranch felt empty without him. Catherine threw herself into her work, cleaning and cooking and trying not to count the hours until his return. The ranch hands seemed to sense her restlessness. Boss has never been one for town, Buck observed one evening at supper, his broken leg nearly healed now. Spends as little time away from the ranch as possible, but I reckon he has a good reason to hurry back this time. Catherine felt her cheeks heat. I do not know what you mean. Sure you do not, Miss Catherine, Sam grinned. We all see how he looks at you, how you look at him. Do not worry, we approve. Boss deserves happiness and you are good for him. He is good for me too, Catherine admitted softly. Tobias returned 6 days later, riding in at sunset with a pack horse loaded with supplies. Catherine ran out to meet him, propriety forgotten in her relief and joy. He swept her up in his arms, kissing her soundly despite the ranch hands hooting from the barn. I missed you, he said against her hair. God, I missed you. I missed you too. How was Denver? Successful. I bought 3 good bulls and arrangements for a dozen heifers to be delivered in spring. He set her down, reaching into his saddlebag. And I bought you this. It was a dress, beautiful deep blue wool with delicate buttons and lace at the collar. Catherine gasped. Tobias, this is too much. No, it is not enough. Try it on. I want to see you in it. She changed in her room, and when she emerged, Tobias's expression made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. He crossed to her, taking her hands. Catherine, I bought something else in Denver. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Catherine's heart began to pound. I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards. I know some would say it is too soon. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? The ring was a simple gold band with a small diamond, perfect and understated. Catherine looked at it, then at Tobias, and felt joy bubble up inside her like a spring. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, and the ranch hands, who had clearly been listening from the porch, erupted in cheers. Buck fired his pistol in the air, and Sam and Willie were slapping each other on the back. They were married 6 weeks later in Fairplay's small church, with the ranch hands in attendance and half the town watching curiously. Catherine wore the blue dress and her mother's silver combs. Tobias wore a new suit and could not stop smiling. Judge Hamilton, who had presided over Catherine's debt hearing, performed the ceremony. Afterward, he pulled Tobias aside. "You did a good thing, son," the old judge said. "Not just paying her debt, but seeing the woman beneath the circumstances. That is rare. I am the lucky one, Your Honor. She is extraordinary." They honeymooned at the ranch, snowed in and blissfully happy. Catherine moved her things into Tobias's bedroom, and they spent their days working side by side and their nights learning the geography of each other's hearts. Spring came in a rush of snowmelt and wildflowers. The cattle thrived, the horses multiplied, and Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Tobias on a perfect May morning, watching his face transform from surprise to wonder to pure joy. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. He lifted her into his arms, spinning her around. "I am terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can barely think straight." Their son was born in January of 1880, during a blizzard that shut down the valley for 3 days. Tobias delivered the baby himself with Catherine's guidance, and when he placed the squalling infant in her arms, they both wept. "He is perfect," Catherine whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. "What should we name him?" "What about Matthew, after my father, Matthew Morgan?" Catherine smiled. "It is perfect." The ranch continued to grow. Tobias hired more hands as the herd expanded, and Catherine managed the household with efficiency and warmth. She was beloved by the ranch workers, known for her excellent cooking and kind heart. When Matthew was 2, Catherine became pregnant again. This time, a daughter arrived in the summer, red-faced and loud and beautiful. They named her Rose after the gentle mare that had carried Catherine to her new life. Tobias proved to be a wonderful father, patient and loving. He taught Matthew to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and he rocked Rose to sleep singing old Texas lullabies. Catherine would watch them together and marvel at how her life had changed. One evening, when Matthew was 5 and Rose was 3, Catherine stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Tobias came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That day in Fairplay. When you walked up to me outside the general store, I thought my life was over. And now I know it was just beginning." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Do you ever regret it, spending that money on me?" "Never, not for a single second." He kissed her forehead. "Best investment I ever made." "It was not an investment. You asked for nothing back." "I got everything back anyway. I got you. I got our children. I got a life I never dreamed I could have." His arms tightened around her. "I was so focused on helping someone else, on keeping my promise, that I did not realize I was also saving myself. I was lonely, Catherine. This ranch was just a place before you came. You made it home." "You made me believe in second chances," Catherine said. "You made me believe I was worth saving. You always were. You just needed someone to see it." They stood together as the sun sank below the mountains, wrapped in each other and the life they had built. Behind them, they could hear Matthew and Rose playing inside, their laughter bright and free. The years passed in a blur of seasons. Matthew grew tall and strong, taking after his father in temperament and build. Rose was fierce and independent, with her mother's determination and her father's kind heart. 2 more children followed, another son named Daniel and a daughter they called Emma. The Morgan Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the territory. Tobias's reputation for fairness and quality stock spread, and buyers came from as far as Kansas to purchase his cattle and horses. But he never forgot where he came from, and neither did Catherine. Every year they set aside money to help someone in need. Sometimes it was paying off a widow's mortgage. Sometimes it was buying medicine for a sick child. Once, they paid the passage for an entire family to come west and start fresh. They never made a show of it, never sought recognition. They just quietly helped where they could, the way Tobias had been helped, the way he had helped Catherine. One autumn day, when Catherine was 45 and Tobias nearly 50, they rode together to the high meadow where he had first showed her the ranch. The aspens were gold again, just as they had been that first day. "You remember coming here?" Tobias asked. "20 years ago this month. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. I still think that." "I knew that day I was in trouble," Tobias admitted. "Knew I was already falling for you. I tried to fight it, tried to keep things professional, but you made it impossible." "I was not trying to seduce you, Tobias Morgan. You did not have to try. You just had to be yourself." He dismounted and helped her down from her horse. "I want to tell you something I have never told you before. After 20 years of marriage, you still have secrets. Just one." He took her hands. "That day in Fairplay when I paid your debt, I told you it was because of my sister, because of the promise I made. That was true. But it was not the whole truth." Catherine felt her heart skip. "What do you mean?" "I had been watching you for a week before that. I saw you trying to find work, saw you selling everything you owned. I watched you stand up to Sila's Crane when he tried to pressure you into accepting his offer early. I saw your courage, your dignity, your refusal to give up even when everything was stacked against you." He touched her face gently. "I did not pay your debt just to keep a promise, Catherine. I paid it because I already knew I was going to fall in love with you. I just did not want to admit it to myself. You loved me before you even spoke to me. I was drawn to you, fascinated by you. And when I finally worked up the courage to approach you when you looked at me with those defiant, desperate eyes, I was lost." He smiled. "So yes, I kept my promise, but I also followed my heart. Best decision I ever made." Catherine felt tears spill over. "I have loved you for 20 years, and somehow I fall more in love with you every single day. That is good, because I plan on spending at least 20 more years making you fall even deeper." They made love there in the high meadow under the golden aspens, as passionate and tender as newlyweds. Afterward, lying in Tobias's arms with the mountain breeze cool on her skin, Catherine thought about the girl she had been, standing outside that courthouse with a rope in her hands and despair in her heart. That girl could never have imagined this love, this life, this profound, bone-deep happiness. But she had survived. She had endured. And when grace came in the form of a cowboy with storm-gray eyes and a generous heart, she had been brave enough to accept it. The years continued to unfold with their share of joys and sorrows. They lost Buck to old age when he was 70, and they wept at his grave beside the men who had worked alongside him. They celebrated when Matthew married a rancher's daughter from the next valley, and again when Rose defied convention to become a teacher in Denver. Daniel took over day-to-day operations of the ranch as Tobias's hair silvered and his step slowed, and Emma married a veterinarian and moved to Cheyenne. Catherine and Tobias became grandparents 7 times over, their house filled with the chaos and laughter of visiting grandchildren. They would sit on the porch in matching rocking chairs, watching the little ones play in the yard, and marvel at the family they had created. When Catherine was 62, she fell ill with pneumonia. For a week, she drifted in and out of consciousness while Tobias sat by her bedside, holding her hand and refusing to leave. The doctor from Fairplay shook his head gravely, but Tobias would not accept defeat. "You do not get to leave me," he told her fiercely, when her eyes opened one evening. "I found you, Catherine, I chose you, and you chose me back. We are not done yet, do you hear me? We are not done." "I am so tired," she whispered. I know you are, but fight for me. Fight for our children, our grandchildren. Fight for all the sunsets we have not watched yet, all the quiet mornings we have not shared. Please, Catherine, please stay." She saw the tears streaming down his weathered face, saw the love that had sustained them for decades burning bright in his eyes, and she fought. She clawed her way back from the edge, day by painful day, until finally the fever broke and the doctor declared her out of danger. "You are too stubborn for your own good," Tobias told her when she was strong enough to sit up, but his voice shook with relief. "I learned from the best." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, I made you a promise 25 years ago, until death do us part. I am not breaking that promise any sooner than I have to." They had 5 more good years after that. 5 years of watching their grandchildren grow, of seeing the ranch pass fully into Daniel's capable hands, of quiet evenings and gentle affection. Tobias's arthritis grew worse, and Catherine's lungs never fully recovered, but they had each other. On a spring morning in 1905, Catherine woke to find Tobias had passed in his sleep, his hand still holding hers. She sat with him for a long time, memorizing his face, grateful that he had gone peacefully, without pain. He was 73, and he had lived a good life. Their life together had been extraordinary. The funeral brought people from across the territory. The ranch hands, past and present, formed an honor guard. Judge Hamilton's grandson, now a lawyer in Denver, gave the eulogy. Matthew, Rose, Daniel, and Emma stood with their mother, supporting her as she said goodbye to the man who had been her everything. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple headstone that read, "Tobias Morgan, beloved husband, father, and friend. He gave freely and loved completely." Catherine lived 3 more years, spending them surrounded by family and filled with memories. She told her grandchildren stories of their grandfather, of the cowboy who had walked into her darkest moment and given her back the light. She made sure they understood that love was not just a feeling but an action, a choice made every day. When her time came, she went peacefully, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch with her eyes on the mountains. They buried her beside Tobias, and her headstone read, "Catherine Morgan, beloved wife, mother, and heart of the ranch. She was saved by grace and gave it back tenfold." The ranch continued through the generations, always in the Morgan family, always run with the values Tobias and Catherine had established. Every Morgan child grew up hearing the story of how their great-great-grandfather had paid a debt and asked for nothing back, and how that single act of grace had created a legacy that would span more than a century. On the mantel in the main house, now updated and expanded but still recognizably the home Tobias built, sits a framed photograph taken in 1898. In it, Catherine and Tobias stand together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. They are older, grayer, but their eyes shine with unmistakable love and contentment. Beneath the photograph is a small brass plaque with an inscription that has been passed down through every generation. She owed a debt that would cost her freedom. A cowboy paid every dollar and asked nothing back. But in giving her freedom, he found his own, and in accepting grace, she learned to give it. This is how legacies are built, not with wealth or power, but with love freely given and gratefully received. The sun sets over Morgan Ranch the same way it did when Catherine first saw it in 1878. The aspens still turn gold in autumn. The creek still rushes through the valley. And somewhere in the mountains, Two souls rest side by side, their love story echoing through the generations, a testament to the power of compassion, the courage to love, and the grace that changes everything. In the end, Tobias Morgan kept his promise. He helped someone in need, asking nothing in return. But what he received was beyond price. A love that transformed them both, a family that carried their values forward, and a legacy that proved one act of kindness could ripple through time itself, touching lives yet unborn. Catherine Everett had stood outside a courthouse expecting to lose everything. Instead, she found a man who saw her worth when the world had written her off. She found a home in the wilderness. She found purpose in building a life from scratch. And she found a love so deep and true, it became the foundation for everything that followed. Their story became legend in the Colorado high country. The desperate woman and the generous cowboy. The debt paid with no strings attached. The love that bloomed from grace and grew into something eternal. And every time a Morgan faces hardship, they remember, grace given freely has the power to change not just one life, but countless lives stretching into the future. All it takes is one person brave enough to give, and another brave enough to accept. That is the legacy of Tobias and Catherine Morgan. Not the ranch, not the wealth, not even the family, though all those things matter. The legacy is the lesson. Love is the most powerful force in the world, and the grace to love without expectation is the highest calling we can answer. Their love story ended the way all great love stories do, not with goodbye, but with the promise that what they built together would outlast them both. In the hearts of their descendants, in the land they stewarded, in the lives they touched, and the grace they extended, Tobias and Catherine Morgan live on. And high in the Colorado mountains, where the aspens turn gold and the creek sings its eternal song, two souls rest together, forever entwined, forever home.